Previously on Quadcast episode 119.
Oh, finally, all about me. Hey, I do like how you moved my name up in the opening.
Oh, and that we have.
Yeah, it's very good.
Right, well,
Mike O'Mara.
You're here.
We're queer. We're not going skiing.
We're here. We're queer. We're not going skiing. So
yeah. So all the Swanson clan are all over the place. This,
do you guys have special hats? The Swanson clan.
Cowboy hats.
Ah, okay.
One show that makes you feel more intelligent for listening.
Well, welcome to Shrink. It's kind of our inaugural episode. I'm here with Dr. Colleen Mullen. How are you today?
I'm good, Courtney. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited about this new concept that we have of doing a shrink view of different films.
Yeah, me too. You know, the last couple of episodes that we did together of your show, the Quadcast, were a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to now having our own show, Shrink to Shrink, and seeing what comes of it, where we get to have some fun and talk about the psych aspects of the movies.
Yeah, you're so serious on your show, Coaching Through Chaos, and I'm so goofy. I'm so not therapeutic on mine. We kind of bring them both together in the middle here, I suppose.
Yeah, I like that. It gives me a chance to relax a little bit, have some fun, and you get to kind of talk more psych stuff than you normally do, right? Because you hang out with over on Quadcast, you hang out with your friend Swanee and talk about all sorts of fun life stories.
Yeah, we just tell stories, and you're scholarly. So, well, you do a lot of homework for your show. You read the books and all that. I don't even read books.
I do. For Coaching Through Chaos, I end up interviewing authors, experts, entrepreneurs, and I look to inspire, motivate, and empower my audience. And we are on season 2 of that right now, and that's a bi-monthly educational podcast.
You know, I always wonder about that bi-monthly. It's like bi-weekly. Is that twice a week or every other week? I always mix that up. See,
I'm not even sure, but right. I think it's bi-monthly would be, we come out every 2 weeks on Tuesday.
There we go.
That's all anybody needs to know.
Not every other month.
Not every other month.
I don't know. I got so confused. That's why I bring the doctor in to help me sort this stuff out. So, well, this week we got on this show we're talking about Gone Girl, which we'll presume that you've seen it, and if not, you should go see it before, because to me, we were just talking. I think it's a lot like Sixth Sense. Once you know the ending, you still can't predict. But once you basically know it, if you've kind of ruined the movie, that's why I took my wife to see it, because once you know what the craziness is, I was afraid that someone would tell her what the ending was, and I'm like, well, that ruins the whole movie. So we'll assume that you guys have already seen it.
Oh yeah, and definitely this is going to be all sorts of spoilers. So if you haven't seen it and you plan to, you should really turn this off and come back later.
Yeah, and we just use the movies as a jumping off point to talk about relationships and things that we encounter all over the place. So we're not like critiquing the movie, although I'm sure we will some, but that's not our goal.
No, our goal is to talk about the things that either are relatable or just super psycho in some movies. And so we're going to talk good stuff, bad stuff, and everything in between regarding what goes on in life. And we're going to use the movies, as you said, as a jumping off platform for that.
All right. Well, so instead of talking about what we're going to talk about, we're going to actually play a clip and start right into Gone Girl.
When I think of my wife, I always think of her head. I picture cracking her lovely skull, unspooling her brains, trying to get answers. The primal questions of any marriage. What are you thinking? How are you feeling? What have we done to each other?
That's how the movie starts, and it sounds a little violent, cracking open her head, but it made me think. I heard Dr. Amen talk about how psychiatrists are like the only doctors who don't actually look at the organ they're treating. Everyone else does, right? You get a broken arm, you cut open the arm, or set the arm with an x-ray, and you do liver surgery, you cut open the body and you don't cut open the brain to look at it, but that's why he uses all the SPECT scans and the rest of it. But cracking open, I can understand the desire. If you could crack someone's head open and know what's going on in there, you could just see little people running around and words, and it would make sense. I think that's what he's going for, but I think they're also doing a double meaning there.
Oh, yeah. And I think the last line of the movie is a very similar scene, and he ends up saying, "And what will we do to each other?"
Mm-hmm.
And, what have we done to each other, and what will we do? And I think so many times, right, most of us don't fantasize about cutting our partner's skull open or bashing it open.
Maybe on a bad day.
Well, I hope not, but...
There's a difference between thinking about it and doing it. You just don't want to dwell on it.
And I think that's a lot of what goes on in this movie, is like this movie gets taken to the levels of they cross the lines. But, right, we can't see into each other's brains. We can't know. And when we talk about psych things, we don't really know. And that's why we know some organic things happen. We know some don't. And we know that meds work. And sometimes we have to fuss around with them to figure out what's going to be best for that individual person. And when we've got couples, they do a lot of things. It's the only place where we have a little environment where no one else is part of, and we give each other, we think that we're giving each other full disclosure, but there's still, as this movie highlights in the most warped sense, there's still so much that we often don't know about our partners.
So we're always presenting some version of ourselves, and I'd like to think that we're presenting an honest version as much as we can at the time. I think when you're dating, obviously you're putting out your best self, but that's the best version of yourself. You're not pretending to be somebody else. You're just not highlighting what you consider to be your weaknesses or things that the other person might not like.
Right. And I think on the end of the best self, right, we're not putting out a false self, but I think it takes a long time to get to that real authentic place in a relationship. And when you're dating, it even takes a good 6 months at least to get to a point where you might have, if you're like totally infatuated with each other, it may take 6 months to have like a real argument where you decide, like, I'm going to say I disagree with you about this, and just kind of go with it and see how you do when you argue, because that is part of having a life with someone, is you do disagree. And so, yeah, I think we want to put out our best self, but usually we get to our authentic self much deeper into the relationship along the way.
Yeah, I think that's the first time we do a healthy relationships class at our agency, and the first 2 classes are all about the individual. It has nothing to do with relating to anybody else. We do the Myers-Briggs, and we do it's kind of an ego states exercise, because in order to present yourself in the relationship, you have to know yourself. And so many people don't spend much time getting to know who they are and what they're about and their different styles. I was with a divorcing couple yesterday, or the other day, and I said, okay, she was the slow decision maker. He's a quick decision maker. So every time they were considering something, he jumps to conclusions. She feels pressured and overwhelmed so that she can't make that decision. He feels like she's blocking. And so I had to just tell him, I said, look, you need to give her some time. She needs an hour a day, whatever, depending on the decision, and you're ready to make the decision. That's just how you guys work. So if you guys understand that about each other, you can give each other a little grace and not think, oh, there she is again, blocking again, or there he is pressuring me to make a decision. It's like, that's how their personalities are, and they have to give each other grace to that and not make it all about the relationship. It's more about those 2 individuals interacting.
I don't use the same tools, but I do individual assessments when I meet with a couple. I do break them apart, and we do an individual session, at least one each with each partner, as part of the assessment process, because I want to know how they think about things. I want to know what their examples of relationships are. I want to know what informs their way of looking at their emotional reactions to life. And when we have couples that come together with these conflicts, as you're saying, a lot of what goes on is personalizing everything and thinking, well, this means something's wrong in the relationship, when really, in the case you just talked about, it's a processing example. one person processes things differently than the other, and we just need to understand that about each other.
Were you like me in thinking about how, this crazy Amy character here was, presented and grew up and finally did what she did in the world and how she operated and how she viewed her own behavior? I kept thinking, what's her parents like? What what was their relationship like? I mean, how, because we didn't get a lot of read on it. We got a pretty flat emotion and kind of, these heady intellectual people, but we really didn't learn about the world she grew up in, aside from the fact that she was Amazing Amy.
Right. And I think that was the world that she grew up in, is that her parents really didn't pay a lot of attention to her because they were creating this idealized version of her in the childhood book series that they developed. So I went with the assumption that Amazing Amy was what she had to live up to, and she took it to a degree that nobody ever dreamed of, because she was having her own amazing party in her psychopath world with herself. But her parents, I think, created what they always wanted in a daughter, and it may have been what she was, but she didn't see herself that way as a child, and so she was always living in the shadows of the kid in the book versus the kid that she actually was, that her parents could have loved as much as they loved Amazing Amy.
Yeah, and the kid in the book was always better, right? Okay, so going
Yes.
to how personalities are different, we're going to go into when Nick gets arrested in his first interrogation and the different types of people that how he is different from his wife.
You got to the bar around 11 today. Where were you before that, just to cross that off?
Well, I was home. I left at 9:30. I got a cup of coffee, newspaper. I went to Sawyer Beach and read the news.
Did you visit with anyone there?
Well, I kind of go to Sawyer Beach for the solitude.
So, your wife has no friends here. Is she kind of standoffish, Ivy League, rubs people the wrong way?
She's from New York. She's complicated. She's got very high standards.
Type A? Well, that can make you crazy if you're not like that. You seem pretty laid back. Type B. Speaking of which, Amy's blood type.
God, I don't know. I have to look it up at the house.
You don't know if she has friends, you don't know what she does all day, and you don't know your wife's blood type.
Sure, y'all are married.
Okay, so what person in this audience didn't look at their spouse and go, "What's your blood type?"
Exactly. I was going to say, I watched this with a bunch of girlfriends, and we were all married, and everybody says, well, I don't know my partner's blood type.
Yep.
And, and there's and the whole idea that you might not know what your partner's life looks like. He goes to the beach for solitude. How many of us do that? I mean,
right.
To think that someday you might have to justify that if you marry a psycho.
Yeah.
That may be something that you need an alibi for. But yeah, there's so many things that go on to the idea there, is that he's also saying she has no friends, he doesn't know the blood type. There's so many things that I think we just kind of take for granted. We take the information that our partner gives us at face value. We find out that this is different because she's manipulated some women in the neighborhood so that in the end it looks like she's got these really tremendous friends. But the husband knew nothing of it because she didn't make friends. And I have to say, on a side note, although I live in Southern California, I'm definitely a New Yorker, and I happen to be a type A. So I guess it can fit, but we're not type A psychos. So
yeah, there's a difference between type A and psychopath.
Psychopath.
It was interesting. It was probably maybe 5-7 years ago. I started looking at, because I'm a type B 1,000%. I'm a slow decision maker. I can get organized, but that's not my default way. And everybody in my life, from my wife to my partner at work of 20 years to my friend from high school of 35 years, they're all type A's. And I surround myself with type A's because I like to lighten up the type A, but I also like to benefit from it too. It's like, oh, people are like, when I would hang out with my buddy in high school, he'd be like, all right, let's get together. I'm like, great. He's like, okay, well, I need to get my tires changed. I need to get my oil done. And then we need to go to the store and get this. I'm like, okay, that's fun. And I can make whatever it is fun. So, and my wife too, I'm like, she's like, okay, we need to get this done. I'm like, okay, but when's the movie? Okay, as long as we got the movie on the horizon, great, give me my list and I'm ready to go. So I think I've kind of inadvertently engineered myself to be around type A's, as I'm a type B.
Yeah, and Courtney, I don't think that's too unusual. Like for as much, so I'm type A, and for some of my friends, I'm the one that they look to see if the battery's ever going to run out, and that they get tired kind of watching everything that I'm getting myself involved in, and then I have people even in my life that I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know how you do what you do, because they are just on. Like I've got a friend who I'm in business with, and she's done a couple of Ironmans, and I'm like, I think I almost killed myself doing one half marathon, and and here she is doing a couple of Ironmans. I've got friends that are like ultra marathon runners, and just craziness. So there's always, as in most things in life, there's always more. Someone could always be doing more, and you could always be doing less, and hopefully we find a nice balance in between.
Yeah, and you keep people in your life who are like that. As you think about this, before we move on, because the next one is about arguing, but as you think about this, do you think that Nick was playing a game, a role? Like, I know we'll get to this at the end, but it just made me think, as we kind of set the tone for him, I think Nick was dating her and doing the best he could with his personality and his style and the situations that they encounter along the way. But I think for her, I don't think there was anything that wasn't calculated. And I don't mean only the evil. I mean, I think at the end, she actually thinks this is the love that we have, and this is what we've created, and this is what we wanted.
Yes.
But he's going, this isn't what I signed up for. I might not tell you that I play video games, or, I like to drink more or whatever it was, he just
date as young students. Yeah.
Well, okay. You know what's really sad? As we watched this, I kept thinking, what did he do wrong? Why did she get so mad at him? And I just completely forgot about his student that he was having an affair with, which was, of course, the trigger, but because that was the ultimate betrayal for her.
Right. And I think that became such the trigger that set off, and people are not going to get set off to psychopath behaviors because they find out people have affairs. But for her, because she had been so tightly wound up, playing this role of the good wife, the supportive one. I think she talks about moving to wherever they went, Minnesota or something, right, from New York, and she didn't want to, but the good wife would go and do that so that the husband could take care of his dying mother. And she did all these things, played along, built him into the man of her dreams, as we'll talk about. And when he then betrays her, there was no other place for her to go except Psycho Town, I think, because she was either going to leave him and life would have to start over, but there was a lot of money invested in their relationship. There was a lot of other things invested, and the fact that she had designed this thinking that he would actually love her, maybe in the way that her parents didn't, because he could really appreciate who she was, because she helped create this great life for him. And when he just went and said, oh, you know what, I got this hot student, I'm going to go off with her, that just broke her wires, I think.
Yeah.
Cracked her eggshell.
She had a thin shell to begin with, because at some point he was going to break her. There's no way he could live up to what she was presenting, which I think she was. She was trying to be Amazing Amy. And that's been one of the freedom points in my life, is to realize who I am, and accept it. Not that I never want to change or never want to improve, but realizing what my strengths and weaknesses are, because I used to, probably all the way through 30, maybe even to 35, used to want to really get on that white horse and be heroic, right? I wanted to say I could do everything. I wanted to follow through with everything. I wanted to be that perfect person. And once I realized, well, I can be less than perfect. I can acknowledge my strengths and weaknesses and say, that I'm not really going to be able to do that, or, that's not within my skill set, or, for me to do that would be so difficult. It's not worth the pain point. Before, I would just always say, yeah, absolutely, I can get it done. I'll do it. I'll make sure, and I'll be perfect, and I'll get it. No, once I realized I could let that go, it was very freeing for me in my life.
Right, knowing that you don't have to be perfect, knowing that things go wrong, all those things that happen in life, when we're talking even about the type A and the type B, finding a balance, and knowing that some days you're going to make mistakes and it's not the end of the world.
And couples argue. You mentioned that before. And sometimes when I'm working with divorced couples, they've never argued. And they're divorced. It's like, how did you get there? It's because they just didn't show up. Well, here's kind of a little example of how sometimes arguments spiral with couples.
What's the laptop for?
Laptopping. Oh, I see. You can give your parents $879,000 without talking to me, but God forbid I buy a video game without getting your permission.
You are spending a lot.
You don't trust me. You don't trust my judgment. You certainly don't trust my intentions.
What are you talking about?
Well, that's the basic tenet of a prenup, isn't it?
Why are you throwing that in my face again?
Because it's easy to throw.
Nick, I don't get it. I don't get why you're daring me to be someone I don't want to be. The nagging shrew, the controlling bitch. I'm not that person. I'm your wife.
I'm sorry. I just don't know how to do this. I've never not had a job. I flip burgers. I painted houses. I don't...
You'll get another job.
You know, all of their discussions, you know, I'm sure you were watching them like I was along the way as they have these conversations about who they want to be and how they want to live together and what they want their relationship to be like compared to other people's. That in the middle of that discussion, it started to go wrong, right? Well, you know, with the prenup and you can give your parents this money, but if I buy a video game, it started to go wrong. But then they save it excellently at the end. You know, he says, I just don't know how to do this. He started talking about his experience, and she said, you know, stayed factual. You're buying a lot, you know, and she encouraged him. We're going to get through this.
Yeah.
It started to go wrong, but then they caught it. And I'm like, okay, well, their relationship is pretty decent when it comes to that.
Right. They actually did what the Gottmans would call a good repair.
Yeah.
And she took on the problem as our problem and created solidarity about that problem. You know, and that argument that they had, that's a great scene, because that argument that they had, or, you know, the start of it, is very typical for couples. And especially when you've got a disparate amount of money coming in the house, or somebody having, as she did, an inheritance or a trust fund. But many couples, you know, minus the big money, many couples have, you know, somebody loses a job along the way, and then they're dealing with their own emotional stuff going on. And so that may take, you know, somebody into, you know, either overeating and they gain some weight, or they might play video games all day, or they might hide out at the bar, you know, kind of go into self-indulgent kind of coping mechanisms. And then you've got a partner who looks on and goes, my goodness, like, what is happening to you? And you have to take yourself out of that place of like, oh my gosh, are you just falling apart? And look at, well, what are they dealing with? And that's where, you know, for as psycho as she becomes later on in the movie, and as we see in the little thread throughout the movie, that was a good repair, where she pulled him in and said, hey, we're going to do this together. And that is where, you know, and she talked about not becoming what she was looking at as, you know, the stereotypical nagging wife and things like that. She said, don't make me become one of these, or, you know, I never wanted to. And so that's when she, I think, really even highlights the role that she saw herself in, that she was just always going to be the wife that was supportive and loving and doing everything that she could for this good guy that she met.
Right. Until he has the affair.
That's right.
And then it flips. Oh my gosh. And then we get to Amy as she's driving away from what was basically her murder scene, leaving Nick in the background. She's making her escape.
I am so much happier now that I'm dead. Technically missing. Soon to be presumed dead. Gone. And my lazy, lying, cheating, oblivious husband will go to prison for my murder. Nick Dunn took my pride and my dignity and my hope and my money. He took and took from me until I no longer existed. That's murder. Let the punishment fit the crime. To fake a convincing murder, you have to have discipline.
Yeah, she disappears herself, but that's amazing amount of discipline. You know, I couldn't be a good criminal. I'm too ADD.
See, now that personally fascinates me. I'm one of these people in the world that has fantasies of escaping my life at different times, and then as we were talking about putting this together, I remembered an article that I read in Wired magazine and I checked it out. It went back to 2009, where one of the writers decided to disappear himself, to virtually disappear, but not go hide out in the woods, but to disappear right in plain sight. And
so just digitally, or
digitally, and so they got rid of his money. He took on a new identity. He traveled around using cash, and it was a little not a treasure hunt, but a little people finder mission. And the prize was going to be $5,000, of which $3,000 was his own money. So this, I mean, and I even this morning went back and reread the article, because it's so interesting to me that in this day and age, we can just disappear. So this was a 30-day experiment for him, and he was found somewhere along that way, but I think he did a good couple of weeks without being found. And he traveled all over the place around the states, St. Louis, New York, Vegas, and there were all sorts of things that he did with, disposable phones, and you can use, prepaid cards if you need to, and selling and Craigslist where everything is cash.
Yeah.
So that's what that, and his name was Evan Ratliff. So I guess if people Googled Wired magazine disappearing Evan Ratliff, they'll find it, or Evan. I didn't have his name and found it. It's the first thing that came up.
See, you found it. You win.
I wish. But I think, in general, I think we have, I know a lot of people I talk with in my therapy practice also have this escape fantasy. Sometimes it's not nearly, most of the time, it is not nearly as elaborate as her, and it's not to hide from doing something criminal. And that I probably should make clear. I don't have escape fantasies because I want to commit criminal acts and run away.
She's running.
I do like the idea some days, and I've done this in my life where I've drove across the country and started my life over when I was 30 and went to grad school and created a new life in California. And I lived in different places, and I enjoyed changing my location from time to time. Now I'm well rooted down here, and I don't have those fantasies so strongly anymore, but a lot of people do, and it's calming to think, I don't have to be here if I don't want to. I can get in my car and just go somewhere.
Right.
And maybe I can just start over, and it makes them feel like, you know what, you could probably do whatever you want. You don't have to disappear forever, though, and you don't have to cut off from everybody, but you can get in a car and drive and be gone for about 5 days and come back, and that might be enough of an escape for most people.
Yeah, I think kids get that opportunity, when they go from junior high to high school, go from high school to college. You can kind of reinvent who you are, and some of those things that were so stressful in the moment in your existing life turned out not to be stressful at all, because you realize what a small part of your life they actually are.
Right. And when you mention kids, I think it all starts in our childhood. We all have like fantasies. I think, I did. Maybe that's where it started for me, where you just are going to go, like, you get mad at your parents and you're like, I'm going to run away.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a fantasy that kids are just going to run away and go live on the street and
hop a train.
Right. And I think you and I are about the same age. So we were teenagers in the 80s, I suppose. And we didn't have, all the digital things at all. So it was really, your own world was really small. It was only as big as the TV, could reach, or the books could get you. And I think there was a lot of that. I'm just going to pack a bag and go. I'm just going to walk away.
Yeah. I never had that courage. I tried to run away one time, and I left a note on my bed, and then I hopped in my closet and covered myself up with clothes just to see. I left my window open. I'm like, but home was good, man. Home was where the food is.
Yeah, I used to hide out. We had a basement, and there was like a little window down below ground, and you could sit in the well. And I remember being small enough and sitting in the well by the bushes of the basement window and just thinking, well, I guess I could hang out here for a while. I guess when it's dinner, I'll go back in. But, in the meantime, I was like, I'm leaving.
Yeah,
and
I'm escaping. You're going to miss me when I'm gone.
Yeah.
And I have had a couple, at least one friend who committed suicide, and I was like, I would think a step before that, and people aren't thinking clearly, obviously, when they're considering suicide. But I'm like, you could just drive. Just drive, fly, charge up your credit cards, whatever it is. You can get away, and your perspective on life will change entirely. The things, you look at, sometimes people go through these horrible exposures through media, and they get characterized as like Jared from Subway, right? They go through these things, and you can imagine the heat that comes down on them, or someone who says something online, and all of a sudden it's considered racial, and now they're being forced to, retire and resign from their positions, and they get in these just hopeless situations, and you're like, look, you could just turn off your computer, and you can turn off your phone, and you can limit all that input, and you can go on vacation where nobody knows. You know what I mean? There's so many things you can do before Amy decides to actually do it for real with her death in her rearview mirror. So that was a big challenge.
Right, and we can just say no to the impulses. Like, we have to say, Jared, like, he could have said no to the teenage girls.
Right, yeah.
I don't want to equate that with the escape fantasy, but I think you made a good point of going to people that are thinking about suicide. And sometimes escape fantasies are about that, and sometimes that is the ultimate escape fantasy for some people. People will have that fantasy of, I wish I were dead. And we have to really critically make sure that that is just a fantasy, that they haven't gone far enough to plan things out and know what's going on. But for many people, the escape is, I wish I could just start over. I wish I could just go somewhere where nobody knew me and I could just be whoever I wanted to be and do whatever I wanted to do, and I don't have to deal with any of my life so far. And I think for me, that's what I related to. Thankfully, I don't relate to that so much anymore, but I think that's what a lot of the work that many of the people that I work with in therapy are doing, is just kind of like accepting who they are and that their life is what it is. And, if you need to get away for a couple of days, that's okay. But you don't have to look at it as, I have to bust out of here to make a new life for myself. Like, you can come back to your life as it is. And And for the most part, it should be okay.
And I think that some of those people, sometimes things happen in their life, like the death of a parent or something like that, and it puts everything in perspective. You're like, wow, that credit card debt, or that bad evaluation at work, or the argument I got in with my friend or my wife or my husband or whatever, isn't so big when you compare it. You kind of get some perspective on things. And sometimes that's what, taking a break or avoiding or taking a vacation will actually do for you. It's like, okay, I need to hang out with somebody else because it doesn't seem so critical when I spend time with a new person. So, okay, let's move back into relationship talk. And this is, again, inside her mind, which as a man is kind of scary.
I can't say I didn't enjoy some of it. Nick teased out in me things I didn't know existed. A lightness, a humor, an ease. But I made him smarter, sharper. I inspired him to rise to my level. I forged the man of my dreams. We were happy pretending to be other people. We were the happiest couple we knew. And what's the point of being together if you're not the happiest? But Nick got lazy. He became someone I did not agree to marry. He actually expected me to love him unconditionally. Then he dragged me, penniless, to the navel of this great country and found himself a newer, younger, bouncier, cool girl. You think I'd let him destroy me and end up happier than ever? No fucking way. He doesn't get to win.
Okay, I just got chills.
Okay, there are so many good scenes in this movie. That was another great one. The idea of creating, and that shows how calculated this was. She forged the man of her dreams. I don't know about you, but I talk with people so much about, like, you can't marry potential, don't date potential.
Yep.
If they're not, and I think that phrase of the person of your dreams, that'd be nice if we all could get that, but you want to have, like, at least 80% of them are good, Yeah,
you gotta adjust your scale here. Great on a curve.
Not going to have 100% person because, you don't want your mirror image that you're with, and that's what I think everybody would need if they wanted somebody who was ideal for them, would be an exact mirror image of them. But so much about, like, the more I talk to men about things, the more I think that they also do it as well. They'll see this potential in the person that they're dating, and they'll say, well, she was this, and I knew that she was on her way there, so that would have been, if she had just kept on that path, it would have been great. And girls do it, ladies do it all the time, where they'll say, oh, well, he was so good with his family, he just had so much potential to be a good father. And it's like, okay, but what about the rest of life? Because meanwhile, maybe he didn't have a job for 2 years and he wasn't trying to get one, or lots of things go on where I think particularly in the 20s, people tend to go with people who potentially are going to be better. And what Amy did is really calculatedly looked at creating, as she says, the man of her dreams, and how dare he want to go off and become even more happier with the things that she's already built in his life with some other woman.
Yeah, and she ends with, he doesn't get to win. And
right.
that is so dangerous in relationships. You know, I forget, it may have been invented by somebody else, but I do distinctly hear my mom saying, do you want to be right or do you want to have a relationship? And, you know, she definitely put it in those terms that he doesn't get to win. It turns into a personal struggle for her against what she was trying to make him. And then he tries to escape it, and she's like, no, you don't get to get out. I've created you. A lot of what I try to think about with couples and even in my own life is, can I just live with this person the way they are? Can I accept the things that I like about them and accept the things that I don't? Like, I have friends who, you know, I have a great time with, but I would never expect them to pick me up at the airport or to be on time for something. It's just, as soon as I can say, all right, well, that's not the person that I'm going to rely on for that part of my life. Or I can't expect this person just to go out and have a great time and laugh and not take offense at different jokes, because I have a pretty broad sense of humor where almost nothing offends me. But there are certain people who I wouldn't expect them to be different. So I just kind of categorize or theme my different relationships and not expect them to be something that they're not.
I think that we all have that, and I like the idea that you put out, that we all have friends that might be really great in one area of our life, but they're not the people that we look to for other things.
Right.
And when we have relationships, I think competition is, and that sense then it becomes control. So competition and control kind of go hand in hand, I think, because if
like competition in a relationship, like between a couple like that.
Yes, and because you think if you've got, and I see a lot of really high functioning type A couples that have high conflict is kind of who finds me for therapy. And when you've got that, you've got people, and type A happens, usually it's people who, and like I said myself, you know, you're striving all the time to do more. And sometimes it comes because you don't want to, you can't appreciate the good moments and the accomplishments as they come along. Sometimes it's driven by other psyche processes, but you know, either way, you've got these two people that are internally driven to always be doing more, saying, okay, that was fun, but what's next? That kind of thing. And when you've got them paired up in a couple, it can turn into high conflict, high competition, because then they're like, okay, well, I got this job, so now you have to get that job. And they go back and forth trying to, instead of supporting each other, they are running against each other. And so even their arguments turn into, well, you did this. It comes into a lot of blaming and a lot of critical statements of each other, because they will say, well, I'm this way, and the other person will say, well, no, it's because you're that way that I'm this way. Right. And they will just kind of battle over who's right. And as you said, do you want to be right or have a relationship? I hear all the time, do you want to be right or be happy? Yeah. And I think about that a lot. You have to, you know, it's that idea in couples of, you know, and a lot of things I'll do with them is teach them about, you know, it sounds so simple, but it's pick your battles. You know, do you need to be right now? Or do you need to keep having the same argument for 2 years? Like, what is the purpose? Couldn't you be having a much more fulfilling time without competing against each other all the time for something? Like, what does it really matter if you're trying to be connected to each other?
Well, and I think couples change in their seasons, just like developmentally people change, right? Yes. So if you connect with somebody in their, let's say, mid-20s to mid-30s, they're developing who they are, what their career is. They're finishing their education. They're, you know, finding out how they're going to live in the world, financially, socially, all the rest of it. And then once that happens, you know, you kind of go into the kid stage, and then you have a new thing. It's like, how are we going to parent together? You know, and then, well, we're not striving to build our careers at this point. We're, you know, branching out into other social things, or do we want to travel? It's like, well, we never even had a chance to travel, you know, because we didn't have any money. So now do we have one person who wants to travel? I mean, so couples and relationships, just like people, go through these seasons. And if you can't navigate those seasons together, you'll be thinking, well, that person changed. Well, yeah, I hope they changed. I hope I've changed. I hope I'm a different person. I hope my values are somewhat different, and I continue to grow as a human, but that's going to impact the relationship that I'm in.
Right. And as you said about the seasons, as with, you know, when we talk about that, like, it's springtime here, but it's definitely fall somewhere else. And a couple may be in a different season than the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's like, then it comes to understanding, well, we're not moving at the same pace, or we're at different places in life. And that doesn't mean the end of a relationship, but it means you have to understand your partner, that maybe you were both in the summer when you met, or both
Right.
in your winter.
Mm-hmm.
And as you progress, your seasons got lopsided. You're not in the same place right now. And so you have to look at that and say, well, how do we kind of make this work so that we are close to being in the same place?
And can understand each other.
So we can complement and understand each other,
Mm-hmm.
rather than going, no, you have to be in the same place as me right now.
Right, or you're wrong, or whatever.
Right.
But I think as we move on here, this is where I think you and I probably, cocked our heads to the side when we heard this scene, because we started to see that maybe it wasn't about the relationship as much as it was about crazy Amy.
Could you walk me through what happened?
Oh, okay. So let me just set this clip up. Nick, her husband, Amy's husband, goes to meet a previous boyfriend of Amy, and who was convicted of rape, and so they meet here at a bar.
I say accused or convicted of rape by Amy.
Yes.
So this is in her past, that she has done this to somebody in the past.
Could you walk me through what happened?
I meet Amy at this party. We click. She's perfect. She's beautiful. She's smart. She's well-read. She's got an ass like a 20-year-old stripper. I think, what's the catch? A few months, it hits me. This is not going to be easy. Okay, girls like a fixer-upper. But Amy, she annexed me. She made me her business. It was just too much. She went out and bought me ties. And we must have gone 20 rounds over that. Ties. I mean, everything, the whole thing just became...
She broke up with her?
No. I just backed away, Gave her some space. No big deal, right? So I thought. Then one night, Amy comes over to my place with a bottle of bourbon and a bootleg of this band I love. And within 2 minutes, she's got my pants around my ankles, and she is kneeling down and... I'm sorry. I know it's your wife.
Had sex?
Yeah, consensual. It was rough, but she was screaming for it. Next morning, there's 2 cops at my door. Amy has wounds that are consistent with rape. Ligature marks on her wrists and my semen. It looks like I tied Amy to my bed and raped her. Me. And then, guess what they find? Headboards in my bed, one on each side.
The ties you wouldn't wear.
You do know your wife.
Did you ever see her again?
Yeah, on TV last week with you.
Chills.
That is when we start to see, well, we already know she's gone. We know that she's done this on purpose at this point. Mm-hmm. But now we see the history.
Yeah, the
that
pattern.
She has set people up in the past. So we know something bad is really about to happen.
Yeah.
We don't know how it's going to happen, but we know something sick and twisted is going farther than her just disappearing.
Yeah, because it wasn't about her. The way she behaved was not about Nick. The way she behaved was about Amy and how she wanted to live her life. And I think if this guy would have not, he was actually wiser than Nick. He backed off. He realized the controlling nature that she had. Although it all seemed like good intentions, she's just making him a better man. He saw it and backed off. And Nick didn't. But then as we see that this is her pattern, we're like, oh man, this lady is crazy on a different level. I mean, she's crazy like a fox.
Right. And then on the other end of things, he's a husband who's gone back, his wife disappears, and he goes back searching into her past relationships. And again, I think that's a concept that I think we all wish for at times when we have an argument with our partner. We're like, man, I wonder what really happened in that relationship that they talked about in the past. Or I wonder what it would be like if I could talk to all of his exes or all of her exes and really find out, am I seeing the same person that they saw? Or is the same thing going to happen in my relationship that happened in theirs? Could I do something to change it if I knew the intimate details really from someone else's perspective? And I think that's another thing that people look at and they say, well, I'm a curious person. Obviously, I'm a therapist. My job is to be curious about people's lives and the human behavior. So this to me is a natural instinct that I'm curious about when I meet somebody. What did your past relationships look like? Why did that end? What happened there? And all that stuff. But I think so many couples don't. They get infatuated and they have the the rush of wanting to see each other, wanting to be with each other, and they get into these relationships, and they'll have sometimes very minimal conversations about what the past looked like. They'll say, oh, well, I dated this girl for 2 years and it ended. We just grew apart.
Yeah.
I'd want to know a little bit more about that. What do you mean you grew apart after 2 years? Did it not happen at 1 year? Like, what happened at 2 years that it grew apart? What does that mean for you? And I think we let things slide when we're infatuated. That can help inform us. And it doesn't mean anything bad. It just means go a little deeper to understand things. But I think that's another fantasy thing that people go into is, man, I wish I could have known or been a fly on the wall in their past, because I'd really like to know what he was like back then or what she was like back then.
Well, and even when someone tells you about previous relationships, you're accepting it as how they present it. So they're presenting it with their filters. This is what I thought and how it all went down, but that's only their view of it. I mean, when I start meeting with couples, sometimes I'll meet with him and her, and a lot of times it's with couples who are divorced or divorcing. And so I'll meet the first one. I'm like, oh man, this next person I meet, they're going to be crazy. How am I going to deal with a totally off the rails person? And then I meet him. I'm like, oh, they're just a regular person. But they've been categorized by their ex as this psycho controlling, or lazy or whatever it is. And then you meet them and you're like, no, that's not, you're seeing a different person that actually exists. You're just blending it all with your pieces together and presenting it. That's why your friends agree with you, right? Oh, you should have left him if he's such a jerk. It's like, well, if you were watching what happened, you might not have the same perception of what went on in that relationship compared to what whoever your friend is telling you happened in the relationship. And same is true for, when you start to date someone, they'll tell you, oh, well, she started to do this or he started to do that. And you're like, well, I see why you left him. But maybe it really wasn't actually how it objectively happened. That was just their perception.
Yes. And I think a fun thing to get people to look at too, and I should say lots of people, and even in my own relationships, I've been friends with my partner's exes and things like that. And they've been sometimes friends with mine, because I think that's totally part of your life. I mean,
that's rare though.
Sometimes people, though, when you invest time in these people and you have relationships, sometimes they work out in ways that kind of you can responsibly say, you know what, we weren't meant to be intimate partners, but you're a good person, and not going to shun them. They might not be major parts of your new relationship, but they're peripherally still in the social circle. So that being said, I think what you were talking about with the different perspectives that we get, that goes on quite frequently. It's always two people, your perception, my perception, and the truth, right? What the reality might look like. So, and I think you have a neat perspective in working with a lot of divorcing or divorced couples, that you get the after effects of their relationship or the aftermath views of their relationship.
Yeah, and I heard somebody say, if you ask me today why I divorced, it's different than how it was when I actually divorced 5 years ago, but both are true to me, So you just kind of change.
That. Yes, right. I would think that the one from the immediate reason of why they divorced is the emotional based one, and then over time it becomes more of the rational, like, okay, but I get it that this is what was wrong in this relationship.
Yeah, this is why we didn't fit. Well, Desi is Amy's, I guess. He's a fellow psycho. They don't really play that up in the movie. You and I both read the book, but Desi has his own batch of crazy.
Yeah, so Desi supposedly had been infatuated with Amy from when they were teenagers, and he stayed infatuated with her, and they would exchange letters, and those letters then became part of Amy's defense later on. When we find out what ultimately happens. But
the one part that was in the book that wasn't in the movie was he had a greenhouse in that place where he ends up getting killed. He had a greenhouse of her favorite flower. So he was growing her favorite flower. I don't know if it was year round or whatever, which kind of showed to me, it's like, okay, you're a little obsessed. This lady's married, not in your life anymore, yet you're still going on and acting as though she's a significant part of your life. That's a little bit of crazy. Of course,
a stalker, yes.
Yeah, and so he comes home, and actually she has a PTSD reaction to start, and then we'll see.
Good morning.
Don't do that. I'm sorry. I need to feel safe.
You are very safe. What have you been up to?
Nothing.
Amy, I'm not Nick.
It's hard for me. After so many years under someone's thumb.
I know just what that feels like.
You were never under my thumb.
On your leash.
Never.
A new start. Decent clothes. Hair dye, makeup, tweezers. There's a gym overlooking the lake. The sooner you look like yourself, the sooner you'll feel like yourself. I'll get groceries for tonight. We'll watch Sharon Shieber and finally move on.
I think that's something I should watch on my own.
Nonsense.
So who's in control here?
Right. Well, yes. He likes to think that he is, but we all know that Amy is.
Yeah, she's planting the seeds. But she says it so well. I mean, again, back to the filters. Like, how do you? What she says is, after all those years of being controlled or being in that type of relationship, I just get a little startled. And when you come in and do this, that's okay. That is textbook. Of course, he's a controlling, manipulative husband, and that's why she left Nick.
She's totally playing out the victim of abuse behavior, the startle reaction. We can't, nobody can see it, but people who have seen the movie know that she changed her whole look and moused up her hair and cut it off and tried to hide, and now looks like a dowdy woman who doesn't think much of herself. I think the funniest line in that when Desi presents her with the items of, here, I want you to color your hair, and here's some clothes, which happen to be like 90s. And but then he says, and the gym is down the hall or something.
Yeah.
She sits around eating and eating and eating, and of course she looks fabulous like 24 hours later.
Yeah.
With her hair done and the nightie on. But his insinuation is, you need to go work out and dye your hair.
Yeah.
And I want the Amy that I loved back, not this one that you've created. Like, I don't like this one.
Yeah, I think in any relationship, if the husband were to say, you could use a couple more crunches, how about some sit-ups and, a few less Cheetos would be good. No, that's the beginning and the end of the argument. And
that is correct.
The husband loses on that front.
That is correct.
But she let him get away with it. So, and we're not gonna play it because there's really nothing, no dialogue. But they have that sex scene, which again, super calculated, and it's like out of Carrie, the movie. It's like the blood is just so awful.
Right. So what we end up watching is her slitting his throat while they're having sex, and she does this. This is her way to go home to Nick. She saves Nick's life essentially by creating this murder. And it is so, when you see, it's probably one of the sickest scenes I've seen in a long time. I don't watch horror movies, but as far as the mainstream movies go, it is probably one of the sickest scenes that I've ever seen. Then she finishes the sex, and while he's dying with the blood, and it's really hard to watch. And I know all of the friends that I talked to about this and the ones that I watched it with, like, everybody has a visceral reaction to this scene, men and women. It's just hard to watch. And then because you realize as soon as she does it, you're like, oh my God, like, this is how she's going to go home. And she creates this fantasy that she had been abducted by Desi.
Right, it's so perfect.
And that's when all of his old letters come into play. To say, hey, he's been stalking me. I was just nice to him. So I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's a tough scene and just says so much about how deranged she truly, truly is.
Well, and I think all sane people don't think of murder and sex together. It's just, crazy people do it, and that's but then to see it on the screen go from this, I guess she's going to have sex with him, so they're going to, connect their relationship even more, and she's going to, who knows where she was going with it, and then when she cuts his throat, it's like, it's awful. It really is. Just because it's such a left turn, it might as well be, a goblin jumping out of the closet and with a scythe or a seethe or whatever.
Right, because because right before that, there's that scene too where she kind of like makes it look in the cameras as if she's been hurt by him, and we don't know what that's about. But all of a sudden, she's acting very nice to him and runs off by herself for a quiet moment, screaming and crying as if something's the matter with her in the camera view at this house.
Yeah.
And so then when he comes home is when the sex scene happens, and Man, that was a tough one to watch.
Yeah. And so she makes her way home, and we start to learn more about kind of how Amy operates as far as how her view of the world. Because before we had his view of the world, like, look, I'm not guilty, and, you know, she was controlling and we were going to get a divorce, and she's running away from what she perceives as a super controlling husband, and he's doing what he can to get her back, yet all the time she's, you know, because she had it set up, vicariously setting him up more and more to look like a guilty husband who had murdered his wife. So he's having that relationship. And then all of a sudden she flips it, and she comes back home, and they finally get a moment together. She's still bloody. All the reporters are outside, and they finally reunite at the foot of their stairs, just inside their entry. And he says this.
All right, you can stop pretending now.
I'm not pretending. You are perfect. The Nick I saw on TV, that's the Nick I fell in love with.
You do know I was just telling you what you wanted to hear, right?
That's how well you know me. You know me in your marrow.
Okay. You need to tell me exactly what happened.
Take off your clothes. I need to make sure you're not wearing a wire.
That is cold-blooded scary, because she says, oh, you were great, and he says, no, you realize I was faking, and she says, yes, I know, you know me so well, you can fake it so well, and she thinks that that's great. She's not pretending. She knows they're putting out this facade.
That's right, and she also, by talking about that wire, then also confirms that everything he believes is true, and says, I need to make sure, I'll tell you the truth, but you got to get in the shower and
turn on the
make
water.
Sure make sure that you're not wearing a wire. You need to be naked so that she can tell him. So she's saying, like, hey, follow me upstairs and I'm going to tell you everything, which will confirm that she is as crazy as he believes.
Yeah, that is, I mean, I guess that's where the, you know, the big flip goes. I'm trying to peg what she is. I mean, she's psychopathic because she's not connected to reality. She's narcissistic.
Right, but then there's that dependent part where Nick needs to be the one. So I don't, and she's not dependent in the personality sense traditionally, but she's definitely sociopathic. But then they've got that, she gets giddy, like maybe borderline, where she then, because she wants Nick's affection so badly, that when he says, well, I faked it for you, you know, like I said what you wanted to hear, that to her speaks of, yes, you love me. Like that's what I wanted. I wanted you to say the words that were going to make me want to come home to you. And you did it. So now you won, essentially, is what she's saying. So I take back not dependent. I'll take back and say borderline attachment issues. So borderline personality disorder, which is based in attachment issues. But she is definitely psychopath. Though. Run like just for the calculated, the lack of remorse, the way that she charms everybody, the way that she made friends with the women in the neighborhood, and they have no idea that Amy could be anything other than this wonderful woman who's getting battered by her husband. I mean, that is sociopathic, to be able to charm people. She is the equivalent of the well-known ones in history, the Ted Bundys and John Wayne Gacy. She's just in a much prettier package.
And only just one person. But we say it in the psychological way, and his attorney, Nick's attorney, says it this way.
She told me she killed Desi. Not self-defense, murder.
Can't we get a wire?
Not gonna work.
She told you once before.
Yeah, because she had me stripped naked and stand in the shower.
I swear, you two are the most up people I've ever known. And I specialize in up. You and Amy under the same roof? You should pitch that as reality television.
Amy Dunn and the Miracle on the Mississippi.
Nick and I have been through some bad patches. We've had our dark days, but we thank you so much for supporting us in our new life together, for forgiving Nick. Really, your encouragement means the world.
Oh, really, she is good.
Amazing Amy and the humbled husband.
The Real Housewives of Branson. Take care of this guy, wait.
I can't believe you're leaving now.
You are not at risk anymore.
I'm the definition of at risk.
You got a book deal, Lifetime movie, you franchised the bar. You may want to thank her. Just don't piss her off.
he looks at it like a business exchange. And I think that's how Amy looks at it. It's like, okay, we're building a life. This is a life we're building. This is the illusion that we're creating. We're just going to keep moving forward. And the attorney kind of sees it like that. Like, okay, you guys could have a Lifetime movie and you can have a book deal and you can franchise your bar and this will be great. This is going to be a great opportunity for you. And Nick's like, I'm living with a crazy woman. This is my wife. This is not the relationship I wanted.
Certainly. And I think the attorney, sees that, but he's like, hey, this woman came back and she's done. Like, she's created everything that you guys are going to have now. And the sad part is of the society just kind of vilified him while they thought he had murdered his wife. Mm-hmm. And then now they love and accept him, and they're the darlings of the media right now in that scene. And she's talking about how much she loves her husband and stuff. And when he says you may want to thank her, just don't piss her off. I think that's just a great line. Because he says, I'm the picture of at risk right now. And he's like, you're out of the woods. You're not at risk anymore. And he's like, no, I'm totally at risk. I'm the next one.
Right.
Like, well, don't piss her off.
Yeah, now
there's the formula.
If they could have made it like it was a business arrangement, at least then it'd be predictable. I think I don't know how you ever sleep with both eyes closed in that household, because he cannot get inside her head. She can get inside his head, and figure him out, but he cannot figure out who this wacko woman is. And if you can't feel safe in a relationship or trust in a relationship, I don't know you have really much of a relationship,
Yeah, and I don't think there'd be too many people that would feel safe sleeping in the same bed or the same house with anybody that cold-blooded killed somebody. So,
it might be a little disconcerting.
Being safe in a relationship, she's a cold-blooded, throat slasher.
Yeah, well, and here's where this is our last clip of the time, and we're wrapping up. But this is where she lays out what their relationship is going to be like.
I've killed for you. Who else can say that? You think you'd be happy with a nice Midwestern girl? No way, baby. I'm it.
You're delusional. I mean, you're insane. Why would you even want this? Yes, I loved you, and then all we did was resent each other and try to control each other and cause each other pain.
That's marriage.
Okay. I wonder what she saw at home. What did she grow up with? The definition of marriage is resent and control. Apparently, is marriage in her definition.
Apparently, yes.
And then he decides to stay with her, which is even more freaky.
And there are other factors that play into that. At some point, she manipulates a baby out of him that he didn't actually make with her.
Yeah.
She steals some semen, and so he decides to stay. He says it's over the baby. But we get by the end of the movie that he's making a conscious choice to stay with her because in some warped way, she's right that she is the woman for him, because he would be bored with these other women that are not as essentially exciting in such a crazy way.
Yeah, and his sister says, I love the way she says it. She says, I can't believe you're going to stay with that thing for 18 years. Because his sister, sees it so clearly that Amy is just a lunatic on wheels. And he's like, well, but, there's some good sides too, and we can make this kind of work. And she's like, you're crazy. Why? How dare you? Do you not remember what she just put you through? She almost got you the death penalty.
Right, and he's only at that point, right, so it's a conversation with his sister where the sister is sobbing and going, I can't believe you're going to stay with her. And it's only like a month out of away from the actual act of the murder. And there's so many times in life where people get farther away and farther away and farther away from a trauma that happened, and they forget how quite painful it was, or how crazy it was, or how disturbing the person's behavior was, and they find ways to overlook it. So that happens to lesser extremes all the time in our world and in our society, where today's tragedy is tomorrow's forgotten memory, and that's what I think it happens for him, is that he's like, well, she's gonna keep things interesting, which is a really sick thing.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Interesting is definitely the definition of Amy.
She'll keep him on his toes.
Yep. I guess that's what you want. You want someone to challenge you. Not in that way. Not when they can keep a knife underneath the pillow and I can't sleep. So well, hey, it's been a great kind of inaugural episode, but really our third episode of Shrink to Shrink, and as we dive into the psychological things that happen in movies and use them to talk about how it impacts our life and our relationships and how it can affect other people. So I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah, me too. So I've had a good time. And so we're going to do this once a month, right?
Yep,
Courtney?
that's the plan, is to plan to release it on the last day of each month.
So if you've got movies you'd like us to talk about, that would be really great. If you just, give us a shout out on @ShrinkToShrink on Twitter. And that's shrink with the number 2 in between, shrink2shrink on Twitter. Let us know what movies you'd like to hear us talk about. And this is our first official episode of Shrink to Shrink, but we've got a couple of other episodes in the past, 2 others, where we talked about the movie Inside Out, which was a lot of fun. And then we also did a whole episode on different AI movies. So we covered Her and
Ex Machina. Yep.
And that was a little twisted perspective on things as well. So we hope that you had a good time. And Courtney, I'm looking forward to this.
All right, we'll make it happen. We'll see you next month.
I've killed for you. Who else can say that? You think you'd be happy with a nice Midwestern girl? No way, baby. I'm it.
You're delusional. I mean, you're insane. Why would you even want this? Yes, I loved you, and then all we did was resent each other and try to control each other and cause each other pain.
That's marriage.